everyone. Today, I'm super excited to welcome David Suich onto the Celestevolve podcast. Hi, David. How are you doing today?
Hello, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show.
David, tell us what inspired you to get onto this journey of exploring 700 near-death experiences. What was it like? What happened?
Well, actually, 700 I was counting, and that's what it was at the time I wrote my book. Now, 18 years later, it's probably over around 1,200, somewhere around there. And what got me inspired was a painful experience that caused me to lose my faith. So I was a Christian, and I came down in 1999, I came down with chronic tendonitis. And it started in my hands, and it went to my feet, and then to my jaw. And it was really debilitating. And I had it for 20 years. And just recently, in the last 5 years or so, I healed completely from it. But this was 2007. I had had chronic tendonitis for 8 years, and it just got me really depressed. And I came to this conclusion that, because I was a Christian, and it says, ask and it will be given, and I'd been prayed for by churches and people and no healing. And so I thought, well, one of two things is going on here. Either God doesn't exist, or more likely God exists, but I'm the son that is the screw up, that he doesn't want anything to do with me because I'm not a good Christian. And so it was during that time in 2007 when YouTube was fairly new. It was only 2 years old. There wasn't there's whole channels now like yours, 345 videos about near-death experiences and spirituality. But back then it was hard to find, one a month on YouTube that talked about near-death experiences. But I wasn't even looking. I didn't even, the subject wasn't even in my mind. And a video just was in my feed, in my YouTube channel. And I clicked on it, and it was about an atheist who died, saw the afterlife, and returned. And that got me started on an 18-year journey into near-death experiences, and it changed every aspect of my life. It brought me a lot of peace and joy. It healed the relationships that were kind of dysfunctional with my family. It changed the friends that I have. It changed my attitude towards nature, towards politics, and all this other stuff. And it had all these positive changes in my life. So I'm very grateful for all the people who have freely shared their near-death experiences, because you saved me, and I know you've encouraged a lot of other people.
For me too, it was one near-death experience that got me onto this whole thing that I'm in. Because I think it's much more easier to understand a near-death story than when someone talks about awakening and these complicated topics. It doesn't resonate. But a near-death experience, because everyone is afraid of death. When you talk about the atheist story, what is it that triggered you? Can you explain a little bit more about what made you resonate with what that person said?
Well, in Christianity, I had been taught, God loves you. He loves you so much. But, if you break his rules, he's going to burn you in hell forever.
Yep.
And what really triggered me, to answer your question, is that this guy was an atheist. He was a militant atheist. Howard Storm, some of you probably know his testimony that are watching. And he dies. He doesn't believe in the afterlife, and he finds himself outside of his body, and all this stuff happens to him. And he finally calls out. He was having a negative experience, and he calls out to heaven for help. Calls out to Jesus for help. And Jesus isn't like the Jesus of the Bible. He's kind of like the core of God that works direct with human beings. So I'm not talking about religion here. I'm talking about one of the many spirits that helps us. And so he calls out to help, and Jesus comes and gets him. And they're taking him towards heaven, towards this really beautiful place of light and love and beauty. And he thinks to himself, I've been so bad. I don't deserve to be there. I'm garbage. I'm scum. I'm filth. And they stop. And Jesus looks at him and says, we don't make mistakes. You belong here in heaven with us. And when he said those words, it just melted my heart, because I realized, I thought that my heavenly Father had abandoned me, didn't care about me. And when he said those words, it was like, oh, okay, God cares about me. Of course, later in my near-death experience research, I learned that, God doesn't just love us. It's just over the top adoration. That's how much he loves us. Like, you'll see these parents that have these kids, and they can do no wrong. My child's wonderful. They're just most perfect person in the whole wide world, the most greatest kid a parent could have, and blah, blah, blah. And just loves them, pours out this love. And you take that love and you multiply it by 1,000, and you don't come close to how God feels about us. So, we have this idea that we've got to behave well to be loved and to be accepted, and nothing is further from the truth. He loves us and adores us no matter what we do. And everybody, when they leave here, eventually goes home. back home to heaven.
You know, it's true that in church, I think, so I'm also a Catholic, and I think all my life I went to church just so that I could, like giving attendance so that I would get what I need in this materialistic world, right? So I've come here,
Yeah.
now you got to give me
point.
yeah, I hit a point, okay? So I'm like trying to score points every time. And then when something happened in my life, I was like, what is this? Weren't my points enough? Like, where did I go wrong? Why is this happening? So I got really pissed off because it's like an unfair teacher in school where we both did the same thing, but how come she got better grade than I did? So, so I broke up with Jesus and I broke up with everybody in church. And then it was like, few years, nothing. And then this near death experience. And like you, after that one near death experience, when you hear this one story, then you dive deeper and like, what is this true? And you start listening to more near death experiences to see, is it true? And then you see there is a common theme amongst all of these stories. In your research, what were some of the common themes that you came across?
Well, the most common theme is the love. And they all talk about that, the love of heaven. And they say things like, imagine the 100 happiest moments of your life, put them all in one moment, you don't come close. Or think of the strongest love you've felt and multiply it by 1,000. Some people have said multiply it by 1,000,000 and you still don't come close. So just overwhelming unconditional love. And, I say the word love, and that's a human word. That's the closest word we have, but it is totally inadequate to describe the love of heaven. And I'll give you a little example. If I were to tell you, oh, Tanya, I'm out in the desert and I'm looking in front of me at my feet, and there's a hole in the ground in front of me, like a big hole. And it's a nice looking hole. Well, what image are you getting? Not much of one. And then you go where I am, and it's the Grand Canyon. So the love is the most common theme is the overwhelming unconditional love. You're loved no matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you did on earth, good or bad, you are loved just as much. There's not one thing that any human being can do, no matter how horrible, that would make our Heavenly Father, Mother, God doesn't have a gender. It contains all that's masculine and feminine. Nothing a human being can do to make God love us one bit less. And of course, there's the feeling of familiarity. I'm coming home. Oh, yes, this is where I came from. This is my home. I was just having this temporary adventure as a human being on earth. So kind of like the opposite of an atheist. An atheist thinks we're human beings pretending that there's a God. Well, the reality is we're little facets of God pretending to be human. And we have this experience where we limit our consciousness and we have amnesia so that we can play the game of the fear-love duality. And we go back home and it's more familiar now. It's like, this is where I came from. There's a feeling of safety, of I'm protected. Nothing can happen to me. I'm immortal. There's beauty in heaven. Like just observing with the senses, there's beauty beyond words. Like we have 3 primary colors, red, blue, and green, or red, blue, and yellow sometimes. And a mixture of those 3 colors make all the colors of the rainbow. There's over 80 primary colors in heaven. So there's these beautiful gardens and there's flowers that glow with their own light, and they make these heavenly tones and they sing. And it's just a place filled with beauty, of love, and there's no fear there. There's nothing negative there. It's a perfect place, and it's our nature. It's where we're from. There's a feeling of safety. I'm going to be protected forever. There's a feeling of purposefulness, like everything I did on my life had a purpose. There's a feeling of connectedness. Oh, yes, we're not really separate. We're all one. We were just feeling the illusion of separateness down on earth. And, that's hard to describe from a human perspective. There's no time. Now, that one I don't get. Now, I've heard hundreds of people talk about there's no time in heaven. They say, well, here on earth, we have what happened yesterday, and then we have what's happening right now, and then what's going to happen tomorrow. But in heaven, it's all the same. I don't get that. But they say there's no time there. So you can be dead a minute or two and have a near-death experience, and your near-death experience felt like 100 years, So yeah, there's a lot of common elements, but those are the main ones.
Once I started doing these research into NDEs myself, I started trying to get those sort of spiritual experiences that they were talking about. Did you have any spiritual experience once you started diving into this whole concept? Is there anything that stands out to you?
Any spiritual experiences? Yeah, I had what you would call a spiritually transformative experience, STE. And it was just sort of a slow realization, a waking up of to who I really am. And probably the weirdest thing that started happening was, and one of my interviewees, it was a 6-hour interview. He told me, "Oh, you're going to start developing psychic abilities," and I laughed at him, because
Yes.
I'm an engineer. I was like, I didn't believe in those things. I would make fun of people who thought they were psychic, right? I'd say, well, there's a fine line between psychic and psychotic, and I think you're in the psychotic. So, and then it started happening, and now it's just a normal part of my life. I'll get on with a client in my spiritual counseling, and I sometimes get flashes of what's going on in their life, or they'll talk about a person and I'll see that person and how they are and that kind of thing. And it gets annoying sometimes. Like sometimes I'll sit down to watch a movie and then I'll see the whole movie, like what's going to happen before I watch it.
Oh.
But yeah, so some psychic stuff. But I mean, we're all psychic. It's just a matter of accessing those abilities. So, and I've had some really deep, beautiful meditations where I'd come out of them and I had this state of bliss, that lasted for a day or two. And then a few times I've seen auras and things like that. But those are the only sort of otherworldly experiences I've had as a result.
Mhm. When you were speaking about how you had a very painful, you were going through a painful period in time. Did you come out of it healed? How did that happen?
Well, no, it continued to get worse. So it started in 1999, and I had some surgeries to kind of relieve the pain in my hand, and that helped a little. But it got worse and worse. And by 2016, I had to use a mobility scooter because I couldn't even walk for 5 or 10 minutes without feeling some pain. I had to use a mobility scooter just to go to the grocery store. And then in 2019, I left California after being there 40 years. I got the tug from spirit to live in my 17-foot trailer and sell everything I had and go on the road for, some time. And I did. I lived in it for 2 years. And I brought an ex-girlfriend that I had in Mexico, and she went with me. And of course, I ended up marrying her. And I think she was part of my healing because she's just an angel of a woman who's just really taught me a lot about unconditional love. And she's been the sweetest, most wonderful person I could imagine to have in my life. I'm grateful for her every day of my life. And then I spent a lot more time in nature. I got the feeling that part of the reason I was sick is that I need to be around nature more. So I left the big city and now I live on top of a mountain in the middle of the woods. See, I got some neighbors. I just can't see them. And then I kind of slowed down, and people are too busy. We're really pushed to move fast. And the other thing I did was I disconnected from the frequency of chaos and drama and suffering and negativity that kind of most of the people in the world are stuck in. They're watching the news, and I don't watch the news. I don't pay attention to the rest of the world. I pay attention to my world, the people I come in contact with every day, and my world is peaceful. There's no war in my world. There's no fires. There's no big disasters. My world's peaceful. And we artificially enlarge our world to the entire planet, which is something we couldn't have done. Most of human history, you never knew what was going on 100 miles away. It wasn't until the newspapers and radio came along that we knew. And so, yeah, people are stressed out over that. So I think all of that was part of my healing.
Something that I keep thinking about is what would it be like if I moved to a place like you are on top of the mountain where there's nature, because I've not been in a place like that. What was it like for you? I know we are like deviating from near-death experiences and all that, but how does it, like, what was maybe like two big things that stands out to you when you moved from the city to the mountains?
The people here I really like. That was the big thing. In the big city, people tend to be very aggressive, negative. You run into a lot of narcissism, and here the people are just so nice. Your neighbors come and they help you, and so many people came by and talked to me. And then just the peace of nature, to be outside and there isn't a artificial sound that I can hear other than the birds, just the sounds of nature. And that's a wonderful part. It was just kind of like and I think I really needed that for my healing. And it's not for everybody. My dad likes the big city, and there's no right or wrong. Everybody has their own preferences, but I really do think it's important, even for those in the big city, to get out and to be in nature. Turn your cell phone off, go for a walk in the park with a good friend or something like that, and spend some time just once a week at least slowing down, because we really have been put on this treadmill of just go, 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 produce, corporate world, be productive, and you got to get off that treadmill every now and then, because we weren't meant to live like this.
Totally agree, because like last year, I'm totally new to the whole new earth, all of these concepts. But once I got into it, it's like, it's so true. It's like suddenly everything makes sense. And that's what I was searching for, that's how it felt like for me. And that's why the whole podcast started. It's like I can't get enough of doing all the research that I'm doing. And last year, it's like I'm getting this message over and over again to relax. And I realized that I don't know how to relax. To me, I think relaxation would probably be watching Netflix or trying to sleep. And it's not like I can, and I realized I can't even sleep. I have to doom scroll myself to sleep, right? So I feel like what you said, the world wants to slow down, but we've got to learn how to slow down. When you've done all the, you've spoken to so many near-death experiences, and they often talk about probably predictions that happen, that's going to come up, right? So what do you think? And you just briefly spoke about the new Earth as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about what are some of the predictions, upcoming predictions that you see for maybe 2025 or in the next 5 years? I see like 2030 is like some big year. Something's going to happen in the next 5 years. But what's your take on that?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have any information from my research or near-death experiences that I've heard that talk about the near future. Now, I've heard quite a few, maybe a couple of dozen out of the 1,200 plus testimonies that talked about the distant future. And it's important to note that whenever we talk about the future, we are only talking about the potential future. And the reason for this is humanity has free will. So like if I'm driving 60 miles an hour north, you can say, well, an hour from now, he's going to be 60 miles north, but I can turn around or turn left or right or stop. And so there is no set future. And so any prediction, even by the best of psychics, isn't 100% accurate. But if you want, we can talk about the distant future if you're interested in hearing that, or we can move on to the next question. It's up to you.
Tell us about the distant future, maybe like a few points.
Okay, so basically what's going to happen is there was a potential future for a long time, and that was we were going to destroy ourselves, which not the end of the world. We're immortal human beings. It's just like you're playing a video game and your character dies. It's like, well, okay, I can just start another game. We're immortal, so we would just come back. But Earth, humanity was going to destroy itself. Nostradamus, Mother Shipton, Revelation, that was going to happen. The Armageddon. And around about the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere in there, we passed a marker, and we're not going to destroy ourselves. So we're going to become what's called an ascended species. And doesn't mean we're going to be in spirit form or we're going to turn into pure energy, but we're basically going to learn to get along with each other and live with each other and with nature in peace and harmony. So the first step is going to be peace on Earth. That's about 50 years away, might be a little sooner. The word on the street in the New Age spiritual community is that's accelerating, so it might come sooner. But we still have war, so we're probably going to have another few decades at least of war. And then once we start cooperating, once we start recognizing that we're one human family, and we set aside the division and the judgment and the chaos and the fighting and all the negative stuff, the cutthroat competition and the greed and the narcissism and all the stuff that's become an epidemic in our society. Once we set that aside and we start cooperating, then things will really get interesting. And about 150 years from now, there's going to be communities structured very similar to indigenous tribes, but with technology. And we'll use our technology in a limited way because we're going to just find out that biology is the best technology. So there won't be cell phones. We'll communicate telepathically with each other. We're going to communicate with animals and plants and tell the plants where to grow and create gardens just by talking with them. And the whole society is going to be focused on teaching children about God, love, nature, science, who they are and that kind of thing. There won't be any doctors. People will learn how to heal themselves. And when they're unable to, the community is going to come around and through the power of prayer and intention, heal that person. There'll be about communities will be about 100, 150 people, and then we'll have spaceships and that travel to other planets. But again, it'll be limited. We'll have around 500 million people, so we'll learn to control our population via voluntary methods. Not what the globalists want to do, which is exterminate population before we're ready. So we need a lot of people right now to make a shift. So we're in a great awakening where we're waking up to a lot of truths. Like we're not separate from nature. We're not separate from each other. We're immortal. We're made of love. We're made of the same substance God's made of. We're all expressions of the benevolent creative source that we call God. And as we wake up to those truths, we're going to get more responsible. Right now, we're like kids who are misbehaving and are just learning how to not fight each other in the sandbox and just learning how to do things right. So there'll be, for instance, here in the USA, there's going to be a new political party, a young party that's going to do things differently. No more divisive politics, us against them, that kind of thing. It's going to be like, well, we all kind of want the same things. Good jobs where we can make a meaningful contribution to humanity, safe streets, environmental measures to keep a clean world and that kind of thing. So yeah, this new world of love is coming, but it's going to take time. You don't go from being a 2-year-old child to a responsible 30-year-old adult overnight. It's just going to take time, and we need to be patient.
In fact, they say that if it happened overnight, it would have been catastrophic. It's good that it takes time. So there's a very graceful change to it. I've never had anyone speak about what's going to happen in the next few years in such a non-dualistic manner like the way that you did. You just I don't have to listen to any more people's predictions anymore. I've got the gist of what's going to happen. That's the best part about speaking to a researcher. Okay, so one of the biggest things that everybody has in their head is what's going to happen after we die? Like, what is the first thing that happens? Is there going to be pain? How is it going to be like? So according to you, what happens? Like, what does the transition look like for most of the people?
Well, when you leave your body, the word death, it makes it sound like it's the end. Mm-hmm. And it's not. It's like waking up from a dream. So that's what dying is like. And so if you have a painful death, I'm not talking about the process of dying. I'm talking about once you die and your spirit comes out of your body, it feels great. It's like taking off an old, heavy winter coat that was really restrictive. And you come out of your body and you feel young and energetic and alive again. And your emotions are heightened and the clarity of your thought is much higher. And you feel free. And, like you don't have a blind spot back here. You have 360-degree vision. And you can just float around and travel through walls and solid objects. So it's a much more real world. So like when you're dreaming, you think your dream world is real. And when you wake up, you realize, oh, that dream world was not real at all. This is the real world. Well, take one more really big step up in consciousness. And that's what dying is like. It's like going home. It's like I left the comfort of my home to go on a hike in the mountains for a month. And it was wonderful. And it was challenging. And it was really difficult at times. And I suffered. And sometimes I was hungry and sometimes I was cold. But I wanted to do that to grow and learn. And now I'm done. I accomplished it. And I had this amazing experience, even though it was tough, even though it was miserable at times. And now I'm back home. Oh, I'm back in the comfort of home. And after a long rest, the way it works up there is you look back at your earthly life and you say, oh, geez, that was a really tough, difficult, miserable experience. But it was also amazing. And it was also really fun at parts. And I learned so much. I got to do that again. And that's what we do. We're the daredevil souls who leave the comfort of heaven, who leave home. We go out, we have these adventures, and then we go back home. And the reason we do all that is because consciousness learns through contrast. So if there isn't a small group of souls having these fear-love dualities and going out and learning and growing, the love of heaven couldn't continue to exist and grow. So we do it because we love our families.
It's beautiful. When you speak to all of these near-death experiences, right now, I think more and more near-death experience stories are coming out. How do you differentiate between if this is a legitimate NDE story or if it's not? Or is there such a thing? Like, how do you know that this is what is called a near-death experience or out-of-body experience.
So how do we differentiate what is a real near-death experience and what might be a fake one? In all my years of research, I have only run across a few near-death experience testimonies where I didn't think they were real. And so there was a couple of maybe signs that all these NDEs have in common that you can tell they're legitimate. The first is the person has difficulty describing the experience. It's unworldly, unearthly. So what if you lived in a world of people who were blind? They don't even have a word for sight because that just doesn't exist. That sense just isn't in their consciousness. And all of a sudden you're given vision. You're going to have a very hard time describing that to people. You know, how do you describe a rainbow to somebody who's been blind all their life? How do you describe a symphony to somebody who's been deaf since birth? Very difficult. So they struggle defining it. Another sign is it transforms their lives. So they come back completely different people. Whatever they were chasing in their life before, whether it was money or career or a hobby or a person, a partner, or something like that, that takes a back seat and they become very focused on loving, meaningful relationships and making a contribution to humanity. So if there's no big change in their life, that's a sign. I suppose another sign would be just sort of the way they are in the way they deal with people. They tend to be less judgmental, more altruistic, and they change careers. You know, they tend to have career changes. One policeman became a high school teacher. Another guy who was involved in organized crime became a counselor for young people who were in trouble with the law. And a billionaire gave up all his ties to finances and became a marriage and family counselor. So they have career changes. And these people just come back very different. And of course, they talk about the many things in heaven, like the colors, the beauty of it all, the unconditional love. The couple that I ran across were fake. They weren't promoting love. They were like fear-based. And there's no fear up there on the other side of the veil. It's something that's generally created by our human consciousness down here on Earth. Now, you can create it sort of in the transition to the afterlife, but I don't believe it exists up there. So there's lots of different elements. But, you know, I was a sales engineer for many years, and I went through training on how to spot a lie. And so these people, they don't give any of the signs that they're lying. And a lot of them don't even want to talk about it because they think nobody will believe them.
Yeah.
So there's some people that I was the first person or the only person they ever spoke to about their testimony because I asked them, did you see a light? Did you go through a tunnel? Did you feel this unconditional love? Oh, you had that too? And I go, no, I'm researching it. And so they tell me. So why would you make up a lie when that you don't tell anybody about? So yeah, the vast majority are true. And you can just tell. You can tell when somebody's being genuine, usually.
You know, I also saw, like, even I've only heard about near-death experiences that are very positive. But then I saw that, you know, on YouTube now, if you check, there are actually videos that show about how I died and I saw hell. And those videos gain a lot of views as well. I didn't bother watching any of them, but it talks about them dying. And then, because I didn't want to, you know, look into what that is. What if it gets into my subconscious and I'm going to be afraid of death? So I don't want that.
Hellish experiences?
Yeah, hellish experiences, yes.
Those are real. Yeah.
Okay, what is that like?
Well, there's about maybe 3% of testimonies I've heard they were hellish. And if a soul wants to, or if they die and they're in a very negative state, they can kind of get lost in the afterlife or have a negative experience. But it's not permanent. It's not a sentence. It's not a punishment. You know, it's not a religious thing. But in the afterlife, thoughts are things. So whatever you think can become reality. So they set up these things called quantum fields, and whatever you want to manifest, you can. So if you go into fear mode, you can definitely manifest and have a negative experience. And I've heard quite a few testimonies where they're out of their body and they're freaking out. They don't know what's going on. They're confused. You know, why is that thing on the ground that I'm seeing look like me? And where am I? And they're going in the fear mode and they have a very negative experience. And as soon as they say, well, I must be dead. and there's nothing I can do about it. And they calm down, the experience becomes positive, and they'll see the light and go towards the tunnel. So it's not a permanent sentence. It's just a temporary state, either chosen consciously or subconsciously. And in every single case, and I heard another near-death experience researcher say the same thing recently, in every single case, when these people who are having a negative experience call out to heaven for help, they are always rescued 100% of the time. So, if you die, you find yourself in a negative NDE, just call out to heaven for help. They'll come and get you. Just like when a kid gets hurt, he calls out, "Mom, you're hurt," and the mother comes running. They'll come and get us if we get lost or get, into a negative spot.
You must have done research on people coming from very different religious backgrounds, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So is there any common themes that you have seen a certain people from this religious background see this kind of a near-death experience? This is what happens. People from this background, they have a better near-death experience. I'm just asking. Is there such a thing?
Sometimes, heaven creates an environment to make us feel comfortable in the NDE. Sometimes they give us what we need, which can be unpleasant, but more often than not, they create an environment to make us feel comfortable. So if a person is Muslim, maybe they'll be met by Muhammad. Or if they're Christian, Jesus will come and meet them. Or if they're an atheist and they're big fans of nature, they'll be brought into one of heaven's beautiful gardens. So they create an experience that makes us feel comfortable. But a lot of them, they have one religious view, and then something completely different happens. A lot of atheists have met Jesus, for instance, who's kind of like the core of God that works as an advocate and a helper directly with human beings, But sometimes people even ask about religion. They say, well, what's the best religion? And they say, well, whatever one brings you closest to God. And even if you don't have a religion, they're okay with that. Even if you say God doesn't exist, they're okay with that. Heaven has no judgments about our judgments. Religion's just a tool. It's just a tool, and you can use a different tool. And if it brings you closer to God to be a Christian or a Jew or a Buddhist or whatever, that's fine.
Interesting. What is your spirituality routine like right now? I mean, do you have such a thing? Because you have probably heard all of these, and maybe you have something like I do meditation in the morning, then I do some Santa Palo, anything like that?
No, I'm not very good at meditation, and my spiritual guys have told me that because I have to be very earth-based as a teacher so that I can relate to the people who are listening. So I'm not too good at meditation, but my routine more centers around when I interact with people on a daily basis. And so I try and be positive with my thoughts and words, because thoughts are things. They teach you that in heaven. There's this thing called law of attraction. Whatever you focus your intention on, it tends to happen. Well, that's not a new thing. That's an old concept. We used to say, be careful what you wish for, it tends to happen. And then there's the old Latin saying, audentus fortuna inuvat, fortune favors the bold. If somebody's bold, it tends to happen. They look like they're getting good luck. No, it's this same law of attraction. And even the ancient Aramaic word abracadabra, used by magicians today, that wasn't the original meaning. It directly translates as, I will create as I speak. So I'm careful with my thoughts and words. I try and be positive. And especially when I go out and I'm interacting with others, even if I'm in a bad mood, I'll try and do my best to be kind and loving and compassionate, especially to those where my ego judges they don't deserve it, my enemies. And your enemy can be your spouse, your child, your parent. It can be the driver who cuts you off on the freeway. And what's the natural human reaction? Oh, you jerk, or I'm going to get you back and get in front of you and brake check you. That's like you got to let that go. You got to say, all right, you know what? He's having a bad day. I've been there. I'm just going to let that go. One of the things that's really meaningful to heaven is when we're purposefully kind and compassionate to those who don't deserve it. So that's what I try and do. And if I know I'm going to lose it, if I got to call AT&T customer services in India, I know I'm going to lose it, I will tell them, listen, if I lose my temper or I'm short with you or not very polite, please forgive me. It's got nothing to do with you. It's got to do with what your company has done. You're just doing your job. And you'd be amazed how well that works. Those people don't get offended when you're, angry about something. So that's my routine, is just to keep my thoughts and words and emotional intentions positive. and to be the best version of myself I can be, to be the kindest, most compassionate person I am when I'm out in the world working with other people, because that's what it's all about. You know, you come back from heaven, and some people say in their near-death experiences, they say, well, what do I do when I go back? You know, what's my mission? You know, give me a goal. And they're like, doesn't matter what you do. Your mission is this. You're supposed to love your fellow human being. That's your mission. Because if you can love in this hostile environment, boy, we bring that to heaven. They learn from us. It's easy to be loving and kind. We're in the perfect environment of heaven. Put somebody in a difficult situation where there's anger and hostility and chaos and suffering. Can you still be loving? That's our challenge down here. So my routine is try and be loving and compassionate in this hostile environment. Sometimes I fail, but
Like
I'm doing the best I
everyone.
can. Yes. I'm doing the best I can.
You must not have researched just NDEs, right? Like, because you're a researcher, you would have done a research on all the other things as well. Because in the last answer that you gave in the last 2 minutes, you just quoted phrases from multiple religions in one go. So
I did.
yeah, you did.
I
You did.
don't know other
You,
religions too well.
you did it. So now maybe just I'm curious, what do you think is the origin of our souls? Or yeah, what do you think is the origin of our souls from your perspective?
The origin of our souls. So
Yeah.
that's a difficult one to describe. How do you describe the soup of creation? Imagine if God was a giant tree. Now, this tree is aware of itself. It can see itself just fine. And it's perfect just the way it is. Feels great and just fine the way it is. Well, how do you get to know yourself better? How do you grow and learn? So what the tree can do is it can say, I'm going to take one little part of my consciousness. I'm going to focus all my attention, and I'm going to go into that one little leaf over there. And then in that limited perspective and limited consciousness, I'm going to look back at the rest of me. So, like, what if you really wanted to get to know yourself well?
Yeah.
What would you do? You would examine your life, the way you react to things, the way you think, the way you feel in various situations, and you would say, well, I know myself pretty well. No. To know yourself perfectly, you would have to become every individual that ever interacts with you and see you from their perspective. So a soul is actually a little facet of God that just goes into one perspective and looks back at the rest of God, that leaf looking back at the rest of the tree and saying, wow, that's me. And when you appreciate yourself or you limit your perspective, you can grow and change. And so the tree can grow. And so what a soul is, it's a little facet of God that takes on the illusion of separateness and has an individuality, even though it's all part of the same whole, and has experiences that are unique and individual from that little perspective. And by doing so, that is the engine of growth of creation. So these physical lives, that's exactly what we do. We limit our consciousness, we have amnesia, and then we have these earthly lives, then we go back to heaven. And we are the engine of growth of creation. That's how creation expands and grows and learns. Now, we're all the same, but we still have our individuality. Hard to describe the soup of creation, isn't it? Very difficult. I'm trying to think of an example I heard about this. Okay, so you're recording this video and you're going to upload it to YouTube. Now you're going to have a copy of that video on your computer, right? And this is going to be a very unique thing. We're talking, we're having a conversation, we're creating this video that's got a certain feel to it and has information that can be conveyed. Is it separate from the rest of the computer? Is that video separate from your computer? Sort of. It has got its own individuality, but when you turn off your computer, it's all just a bunch of ones and zeros on the hard drive. But anytime you want, you can take out that pattern and it becomes this video of you and I being a child who's physically abused. Even the most horrible experiences you can think of can be used as a learning experience, and souls will choose to have those experiences to learn and grow. The one exception is suicide. It is never beneficial to commit suicide. It's always a step back in our emotional and spiritual development. It's like if you've got to graduate from the university and you're taking this class and you drop out halfway through, well, now you're going to have to take the class again. And it devastates family and friends, and it just makes more work for you. So it's not a good thing. So, I was in a place in my life where I was clinically depressed, and I wanted my life to end. And the only reason I didn't end it, because I knew that, from my near-death experience research, I knew that this wasn't going to be a good thing. It wasn't going to help. So, had I seen what was coming, my good life today, where I have a lot of joy and peace and a wonderful wife and a nice home, my body healed, if I saw what was coming, I would have never contemplated it. So, if somebody out there is struggling with that, who's listening to this right now, don't think that just because you're struggling, you're failing. You're not. And no matter what happens, never give up on life. You're going to go home someday naturally, and you're going to be glad you stuck it out. And I know it's tough down here. I've been there, waking up every day and saying, I just want this to end. I can't take any more. I'm so depressed. I'm so alone. Nothing's going to change. Well, it is going to change. And even if you've chosen a life that's difficult your whole life down here and it's not going to change until you die naturally, stick it out. Hang in there. And if you got to get help, get help. Don't give up on life. There's people that love you and care about you, if not here in this world, in the afterlife. And you're loved more than you can know. You're never alone. You might feel like you're alone, but you're not. So hang in there if you're thinking about that.
Let that message stay there and give a moment of silence for that, because I think that's a very important message. A lot of people are going through struggles right now, and it might seem like it's the end of the world, but the message that David has said, I think that's beautiful. It's amazing. Thank you, David, for that message. So, David, is there a difference between an out-of-body experience and a near-death experience? Do you know? Have you come across anything like that?
Yeah, they're different. Out-of-body experiences, you don't get the quite feelings of love and the connection to the afterlife and all those beautiful things. But many people have had out-of-body experiences. My understanding is that when you go to sleep at night, every night your soul leaves your body and goes to heaven, and there's some communication, and they might give you some help. That's why people say, well, I'm going to sleep on this, because you actually get help with your decisions at night. And then some people are aware of their out-of-body experiences, and some people can do it involuntarily or voluntarily. They can just lie down and come out of their body and travel. I have never been able to do it, but I know I've done it involuntarily, because when I was younger, I used to be lying in bed, and when I was like half asleep, I felt like I was falling, and I would slam into my bed and wake up. Well, that was my soul starting to float above my body. I don't know if anybody's had that experience. If you have, put it in the comments. I'd be kind of interested to know how many people have that experience. But yeah, we all have them. It's just that some people can do it voluntarily, and some remember them. And so they can kind of astral travel, go to different places. And
that's interesting. Out of all of these stories that you've heard, what are some of those favorite stories of yours that's moved you?
I liked Howard Storm's story. He was my favorite story, the first one I ever heard. Kathy Jordan, her story that she talks about in A Birth Called Death, I really like that one. And there's so many good stories. I mentioned, I think, Mickey Robinson. He was in a plane crash, and one side of his face is all burned, and he goes around giving talks, and he talked about how it transformed his life. And there's so many wonderful stories out there. And even some of the Hollywood actors and actresses, Kurt Russell, Peter Sellers, had near-death experiences. And I think Shirley MacLaine had a spiritual awakening, and she even made a documentary that's on YouTube called Out on the Limb, where she talks about the Pleiadians and all that. And so, yeah, those are my favorite testimonies. Howard Storm and Kathy Jordan are two of my favorites.
Oh, talking about the Pleiadians, what's been your research? So what's come out of extraterrestrial beings, or all of the Pleiadians and Arcturians and all of that? What's come out about them?
Interesting you mentioned the Arcturians, because Pleiadians are our cosmic parents. They kind of are watching over us and taking care of us, and the Arcturians are our cosmic grandparents. They're the parents of the Pleiadians.
Oh,
so
okay.
When you become an ascended species and you stop fighting each other and you create the little utopian paradise, your job becomes to see life on another planet and to help them. Just like when you're a child, you grow up, and then when you're a grown up, your job is to have children, and you kind of help them out. So the universe is full of life. In this galaxy, about 95% of the species are benevolent or neutral, and about 5% are misbehaving, but they're kept in check by the Galactic Federation. It's just sort of this group of benevolent beings that kind of watch over things. They're here. They're not going to show up and land a spaceship on the White House lawn. That's going to cause a panic, crash world markets. So they're doing what they're doing now. You show up slowly, more and more appearances here and there. And then when everybody's seen them all the time and they're comfortable with it, then they'll show up. And they're not going to give us all this technology, just like you don't give a knife to a 2-year-old. He's going to cut himself with it. You don't give explosives to a 5-year-old on the 4th of July. He's going to blow his hand off. So, they're not going to share all the technology, but they're going to help us out. And so they're going to appear more and more and more. And there's about a dozen species visiting us on a regular basis. And there's a couple hundred that come by every now and then. But, we're not ready for public first contact, because we're too barbaric still. But we're growing up fast. So it's like if you were in a new neighborhood and the neighbors came around, you say, hey, you see that guy over there? He spends half his money on weapons and guns and military gear and all that. And if you knock on his front door, well, he might not open the door pointing the gun at your face, but he's going to have it right there at his side, ready to go, because he doesn't trust you, because he's projecting his mistrust onto you. Would you knock on his door? No, you'd probably observe him from afar, right?
Yeah.
Well, who did I just describe by that neighbor? I just described the United States government. Half their money on military. If the spaceship landed on the White House lawn, you think they'd come out with flowers and hugs and handshakes? No, there'd be a military response. They'll be ready with the guns. So they're not going to show up yet. But they're going to do it on an individual basis. They're going to turn their shielding off so we can see them. A lot of them have shielding, so you can't see. I mean, if you see a Pleiadian ship, it's because they wanted you to see it. They got camouflage. Our military has good camouflage right now. You go on YouTube, military camouflage, you'll see some pretty good stuff. That's 200 years of technology. They've had several million years. So, yeah, they're going to show up little by little, and eventually they'll make themselves known, and they're going to want us to be a productive member of the galactic community. That's where this is going towards. So they're kind of trying to keep us from blowing ourselves up while we mature, just like a parent tries to keep the 2 kids from killing each other in a fight.
Have you met any of them?
Stop fighting, yeah.
Have you met them? Have you seen the spaceships or anything?
No, but I know I was Pleiadian in another lifetime.
Okay.
So the very first word I spoke was bata. And my parents would say, well, what does that mean? And I would just repeat it. And then I just kind of gave that up and started talking normally like a kid. And I just forgot about it. And then when I started all this stuff and learned about the Pleiadians, I was watching this special and they were saying, now so-and-so met this teacher and teacher in Pleiadian is bata. Now, this is after one of my interviewees told me, oh, you're a teacher. Well, I was an engineer. I was like, I'm a teacher. So here I am later teaching. Yeah, I had a life on the Pleiades. And I was called bata. That's the first word I ever spoke. And then the weird thing about it was when I was watching this whole documentary, I'm like, well, wait a minute. I was always fascinated with this one little star system in the sky. I would call it the old lady in the rocking chair. And I was like, I type it on the internet, the Pleiades, it was that star system that I would always look for. Even to adulthood, I would always look for that little star system. And I didn't know why. I never thought about it. It's just like, oh, there's my little star system I always look for.
Oh, my God.
Subconsciously, I knew I lived there once, So, yeah, I used to be Pleiadian. Many human beings, you don't start off on Earth. You don't start having a life on Earth. It's the most difficult planet in this whole galaxy to incarnate into. It's the 3rd most difficult in the universe. You don't take a kid who just learned how to walk and send him on the Appalachian Trail for 6 months. He's going to die, so you got to build up to it. So our first lives are on planets where they're kind of living in utopian paradises and you get used to physical lives. And then you go more and more and more. Well, if you add up all the lifetimes on all Earth and all the other planets, the average human being is more than 1 million years old. So if you're watching this, you've done this before. Now you're like an expert. You're like climbing Mount Everest,
Jeez.
You're like a daredevil soul taking on the biggest challenge. Yeah. So if you're here, you're doing great.
Oh my goodness, that's so fascinating. So I'm just a little bit more curious about the Pleiadian life. Do you remember what it was like? Like, do you remember what the planet or nothing? You didn't do any QHHT sessions, this past life? No, nothing like that.
No, but I've been told by psychics that I was Pleiadian, things like that. I got confirmation of it. And things like that. But I don't have a memory of it.
Interesting.
Tesla was Pleiadian.
Elon Musk. Oh,
Yeah,
Tesla, the Tesla. Okay, Tesla. Fine.
No, not Elon Musk. Nikola Tesla.
Nikola
he came up
Tesla.
with the AC motor,
Yeah.
alternating current, the radio, all these inventions. He predicted cell phones 100 years ago or whenever he was around. He said, "Oh, one day you're going to have these handheld things communicate with anybody in the world." Yeah, he was Pleiadian. So
interesting.
Came here to bring electricity to us, and he did his job, and he'll probably come back.
Oh, love it. Okay, so David, what are some of these projects that you're working on?
Well, right now I'm volunteering on the board of directors of the Ascension Institute. So we're planning a Peru trip to visit megalithic structures, and I'm contributing to a couple of books that we have out, to working on a docu-series. And I'm working on a second book called The New World of Love. And that's pretty much it. I do my spiritual counseling. I still do my power plant consulting on the side. I was a power plant engineer. And, for those of you who aren't in spiritual work, like our host and myself, you don't make much money doing it. So most of us kind of have a side job.
We have to.
Sometimes when I talk about my book, people write in the comments, "Oh, he's just talking about this for money." It's like, oh, I wish I were talking about it for money. If I took all the money I've made and I divide it by the hours I've put into it, it's like less than minimum wage. So yeah, I do power plant consulting to bring in some income for my wife and I. But yeah, that's the things I'm working on.
The Ascension Institute, that's interesting. What's that about?
The Ascension Institute, yeah.
Okay, so what is that about?
Well, it's going to be similar to, it's just going to be similar to things like IANS, International Association of Near-Death Experience Studies, or NDERF, or Spiritual Awakenings International. So it's one of many organizations that's going to be helping raise the consciousness of humanity, to talk about all the same things you talk about on your channel. And I just heard recently from a channeler that people who have channels like yours, there's lots of these channels out there now. There wasn't back in 2007 when I first clicked on that YouTube video. You guys are a big part of bringing this new consciousness and this new way of doing things, a new way of thinking, and these new revelations, these new truths into the consciousness of humanity. You're a big part of this raising of consciousness and of the Great Awakening. So we're all contributing in our own way. And the Ascension Institute is just one of many that's working in this big team, along with you and many others.
I mean, this is where all the happening stuff is happening. It's like the cool kids club. Like, why wouldn't I be a part of that? It's like the best thing that I'm part of. So I just wanted to be a part of this elite club. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's more like a teacher's. So it's the older souls who are doing this. So the way it's going to work is the older souls are kind of bringing the information in. And then when the young generation comes in, they're going to take all this information we're giving them, and they're going to make the world a better place. So we're kind of bringing the information, and then the workers are going to come in and make the changes, the next generation that's coming in. So we're just kind of acting as a guide and a teacher, and because there's a lot of confusing information out there in the world, and there's a great deal of manipulation and fear-mongering and other things. So we're kind of the voice of reason, telling the children to calm down. It's going to be okay. And look at all the things you can do. You can do anything you want. So we're kind of like the adults in the room at the moment.
That's good. Is there anything like this for the channelers, like just for channelers to make it more legit?
I'm sorry, what's the question again about channelers?
Yeah. Are there institutions, because, we have these sort of certifications we give for yoga trainers. So something that legitimizes what they're doing. Do we have something like that, like an institution or something for the channelers, people who are channeling now all of these other beings and so on?
There might be. I don't know. But there are so many channelers now. It's becoming an accepted thing these days.
Yeah.
Channeling. I mean, if you channeled 50 years ago, the Judeo-Christian community would call you demon possessed. Now
Agreed.
We're kind of realizing, no, this is a real thing. And that's the way you communicate across the vast distances of space. It's mind-to-mind communication via channeling, because radio waves and light waves are too slow. The speed of light is too slow. It takes 9 minutes just to get from Earth to the sun. Well, think about going to another planet 50 light years away. It's going to take 50 years just to get a message. So it's this mind-to-mind communication, channeling, and it's becoming an accepted thing. But yeah, there's probably institutions out there who are teaching it or certifying it. I just don't know.
It's true. It's becoming a lot more common now. And I can't believe that I came across this just like a year back. At that time, I was like, oh my God, what's this? This must be like some magical thing. And now it's become so common for me. I mean, it's just become like a normal thing. Channeling, normal.
Yeah, it's normal to me. My favorite channelers are Kryon, Kryon.
Yeah,
I
crying.
also like Bashar, and there's a few Pleiadian channelers that I listen to that I really like. But channeling often, depending on how good the channeler is, the message can be contaminated with the personal beliefs and perspectives of the human being channeling. The pure channelers like Kryon, the message is pretty pure, but others it's not. So if you're listening to a channeler, make sure you say to yourself, how do I feel listening to this channeler? Is it putting me into fear, or is it calming me? Is this a message of love or a message of division and fear? And if it's fear-based or if it's making you uncomfortable, turn it off. Do not listen to that channeler. Stick with the ones that speak to your heart. That's my advice with channeling.
Beautiful. And the documentary that you're speaking about, when is that coming out?
Oh, I can't remember when they're planning that for. It might be end of this year, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
This would come out on Netflix?
It's going to be a docuseries we're going to be submitting to Amazon Gaia, I think.
Oh,
and I'm
Gaia.
contributing a chapter for the companion book that's going to go with the docuseries. So,
oh my gosh.
I'm not running that. There's a couple of members that are really kind of doing all the hard work. I'm just kind of making a few contributions. So
amazing, amazing. So we have something called the cosmic close at the end of our episode, which is where I ask 2 questions. And the first one is, how may we enjoy lasting peace and happiness?
How may we enjoy lasting peace and happiness? That's a good one. The old analogy, you want to see the glass as half empty or half full. Lasting peace and happiness is all about our perspective. It's all about the things we focus on. There was this guy, he used to make these little model trains, and he's got a little museum in Ohio. I think his name was Mooney, they called him. But he would spend a couple of years designing these little model trains, and very detailed, and they were so good and so realistic. So one day he decides to make this model train that's got a little crank up mechanism with a spring so that it would move along the track, because all his model trains were just stationary. And he spends a year or two of his life, I don't know how long it was, but it was a long time, making this model train. And he finally finishes it, and he's going to demonstrate it to his friends and family, a celebration of, I finally finished this big project. And the little regulator that lets the energy out slowly broke. And so all the spring tension got released at once, and the train went racing down the track and went off the track and smashed into the wall in a million pieces. and as the friends and family were sitting there with their jaws open, he starts laughing. And they said, Mooney, why are you laughing? And he says, I had my first train wreck, and that's the way you got to deal with life. You do your best every day to be kind and compassionate to yourself and others, very important to yourself. And then when the bad things happen, you just do your best to smile and get through it. That's where I get challenged. I struggle with the bad times when things aren't going right, but do your best to smile, to laugh about it, and to get through it, and just be your best that you can be. And that's how it changes the world. Be the best version of yourself you can be. And when you screw up, don't give yourself a hard time. This is a really difficult environment to be in. Even Jesus got mad.
Yeah, he did.
The tree that withered. He went to the temple and turned about. He got mad. He would say, "Oh, how long do I have to deal with these people?" If the core of God who came down here got frustrated, I mean, of course we're going to screw up. Every parent knows that the child is going to make a lot of mistakes. So when you make a mistake, cut yourself some slack. That's just the way we are. You're perfect in the heavenly realm, but in this game, you're going to make mistakes. And if you didn't, well, it would ruin the game. So it's okay to screw up, and it's okay to have bad days, and it's okay to be bad, and it's okay to treat others cruelly. Just do your best, I would say, to learn from it. Yeah.
I love that. The second question is, what do you think is the nature of our reality?
The nature of our reality is a multi-dimensional quantum energy that we call love.
Ooh.
It is the fabric of the universe. It's the glue that holds the universe together. It's the substance that expresses itself in all that is. We are love. At the core of every human being, even the worst of the worst, is the love of creation. In the space that we think is empty, between the nucleus and the electrons of an atom, is the love of God. It is everywhere and in everything. And its nature is immortal, and its nature is perfection. You wouldn't think looking around at the world today, but this is part of a perfect game that we're playing.
I love that. I have one more question though. What are some of your favorite books that's changed your life? Because you must have read a lot, right?
Yeah, I've read maybe 40 or 50 books on near-death experiences. I think I mentioned Kathy Jordan, The Birth Called Death. My favorite is My Descent into Death by Howard Storm.
It doesn't have to be a near-death experience. Any other kind of books also. Like something else which is not a near-death. Yeah.
So yeah, some of my favorite books are The Birth Called Death by Kathy Jordan, My Descent into Death by Howard Storm. That doesn't have a cover on it. 90 Minutes in Heaven. That's a great book by Don Piper. He was a pastor who died. And this is good if you're struggling with physical stuff. It talks about his recovery, which was very difficult. Life After Life by Raymond Moody. I actually read this book when I was, I think, 15 years old, but I kind of dismissed it and I set it aside. And of course, if you want to support me, this is my book. This is the second edition, God Took My Clothes. So those are some of my favorite books about spirituality, near-death experiences. One that I have heard that is supposed to be really good is A Course in Miracles. So I've got that one and I'm going to be working through that one next. So those are some of my favorite books.
Love that.
And there's some great documentaries out there as well. And it's not really near-death experience documentary, but there is a movie called I Am by Tom Shadyac, which sort of encompasses these ideas we've been talking about, even though it's not really from a spiritual perspective. He kind of talks about all that stuff. There's a movie called Discover the Gift. Okay, so I really liked Beyond Our Differences. And there is a video on YouTube called Crossing Over New Beginnings. And that was put out, I think, in 2011, right before this hysteria and fear of 2012 was coming along. And that kind of talks about what happened in 2012, which was us crossing a boundary or a marker or going into a new paradigm. So for thousands of years, the paradigm was we're going to destroy ourselves. And really what's happening, the Mayan calendar is saying we're going to destroy ourselves. No, they were talking about the end of an age, the end of what is going to be known in the future here on Earth as the barbaric age, where we fought each other, where we were ignorant, where we were, cutthroat competition and screwing each other over. And we weren't, helping those who were in need because we didn't realize that we're all connected. And that's a very good movie that talks about the positive spin on this new age that's coming in.
I love that.
All very good.
I'm definitely going to watch that one. David, thank you so much for the work that you do. Please, can you tell us where we can find you?
Well, my email and some information about my work is at godtookmyclothes.com. And there is a preview to the copy of my book. So you can download the first couple chapters, see if it's the kind of thing you're interested in. It's also in French and Spanish. And then there's a link at godtookmyclothes.com to my spiritual counseling. And if you have financial difficulties, you send me an email. I have a program, a discount for those with financial hardship. And of course, if you don't want to spend any money at all at the time of this recording, I am still answering all emails. I answer with a voice recording because I just get too many emails, but you can send me dozens and dozens of emails. I've got people that have sent me emails and I've had hours of answers, and that's completely free.
David, what an honor to have the teacher Bata, right? From the Pleiadian Consulate coming here on the planet Earth to teach us these wonderful concepts, to teach us what is the purpose of living here, what to expect after life. Thank you so much, David, for the work that you do and for coming on the Celestevolve podcast. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tanya. It was a pleasure being on your show.